Chapter 321. Unexpected Bonus Reward.
Alaric was amused by his response. He glanced meaningfully at Stephen and said, "I will go help with the interrogation, so please excuse me, Sir Stephen." "All right. Do be careful, my lord. There might be some stubborn bastards who harbor ill intentions." Stephen reminded him. Alaric merely chuckled in response. He then waved his hand and left. Looking at his figure, Stephen fell into deep thought. Is he suspicious of me? He recalled his past interactions with Alaric, trying to remember if he had somehow given himself away. However, he didn't remember making such newbie mistakes. I need to be careful around him. Maybe I should stay away from Alaric for the time being lest he gets more suspicious of me. Thinking about this, he left to help the others with the interrogation. In the next few days, Grataja fell into a state of uncertainty and unease with the death of the Grand Duke. Those who had ties with the Grand Duke were feeling incredibly scared. They were afraid that they would be executed by Lucas' troops for the act of colluding with the traitor. Unexpectedly, other than being questioned, none of them were harmed. On the 5th day, Lucas returned to Cadera to report the success of the mission to the Crown Prince. Upon his arrival in the capital, he was greeted by a group of nobles who were clearly there to flatter him. "Welcome back, Venerable Lucas. Lord Venerable, you did great work in dealing with the traitor of the Empire." Facing these group of sycophants, Lucas only responded casually. Talking with them was a complete waste of time, so he rudely excused himself. No one complained about his behavior. Who would dare to get angry at a mythical knight? Only an idiot would. Although they were furious at his clear disregard, they didn't dare voice out their complaints. A while later, Lucas brought the group to a high-end inn. It was also the same place where he got the Crown Prince's command to punish the Grand Duke. The Crown Prince had booked the entire building so other than the establishment staff, only their people were present. Lord Venerable, the Crown Prince, Leonard Exler-Estania, eagerly welcomed him at the entrance. Lucas cupped his fists. "Your Highness, I have completed my mission." The Crown Prince was all smiles. He made an inviting gesture and replied, "I have heard of your exemplary work, Lord Venerable. Come in. Let us talk inside." Lucas didn't want to embarrass the Crown Prince, so he accepted the invitation with a nod of his head. Exler brought them to a vast lounge which had been obviously renovated recently. From the shiny chandeliers and the intricate interior design, the whole place looked like an imperial hall. After taking their seats, Exler expertly guided the conversation. He didn't immediately discuss the Grand Duke's matter. However, Lucas wasn't in the mood to converse with him. He couldn't wait to see Princess Jade, so he mentioned it to the Crown Prince. "Of course, I will never dare lie to you, Lord Venerable." Exler chuckled. He then made a hand gesture to one of his subordinates. A few minutes later, the Crown Prince's subordinate returned with a white-haired woman dressed in standard imperial dress. She looked stunning, and the moment she arrived, the whole place quieted down as if to silently admire her beauty. Seeing this woman, Lucas felt a wave of excitement and a trace of guilt. Slowly standing up, he muttered while staring at her, "Jade! Greetings, Your Highness." The Crown Prince cupped his fists at the woman to show her his respect. His subordinates followed suit and bowed deeply to her. "Your Highness." Jade ignored the large crowd. In her eyes, only two people existed, Lucas and Alaric. She gracefully walked towards them, leaving a trace of her natural fragrance in the air. Lucas! Her eyes misted over. She had been waiting and biding her time, all for the sake of reuniting with him and their son. Her prayers were finally answered. Without care for his image, Lucas took her in his embrace and gently rubbed her back. "I'm sorry I came late," he whispered with remorse. "It's not your fault." Jade shook her head while staring at him with deep affection. The Crown Prince wasn't upset after being ignored. He just smiled at the couple and quietly signaled for everyone to vacate the hall. In the next moment, only the family of three remained. Alaric was watching his parents display their affection when a sudden system prompt interrupted him. Under sir. Mission complete. Rewards 2,500 battle points, 150 XP, 50 stat points. Random trait upgrade card X1. Equipment upgrade card X1. Undersir. You have completed the mission without casualties. A bonus reward will be granted for this achievement. Only applies for extreme difficulty missions. You received Catastrophe Grade Steed Card X1. Alaric's eyes widened upon seeing the bonus reward. Catastrophe Grade Steed Card? This isn't what I am thinking, right? The strongest monster he had encountered was the winged goblin monarch in the Enchanted Woodlands. It was a being that was about to become a catastrophe-grade monster. It was so powerful that Lucas, who was at the peak of the transcendent realm at that time, only barely managed to kill it. And now, he had actually received a catastrophe-grade steed as a reward. How could he not be shocked? This was a true catastrophe-grade monster. Do you want to use the catastrophe-grade steed card? Yes. No. Alaric didn't dare click. Yes. He might scare the entire capital, so he decisively clicked. No. I will deal with the rewards later, he thought as he closed the cyan screen. My son. Jade finally glanced in his direction and approached him. She then gave him a tight hug. I wanted to do this when you visited me in the palace, but our time was limited at that time. Please forgive your mother. She mumbled emotionally. Alaric didn't know how to react to the sudden intimate contact, but when he saw his dad sending him a look of encouragement, he no longer hesitated. He quietly embraced his mother and enjoyed the reunion. Chapter 322. Max Battle Points. After the reunion, the family of three didn't leave the capital right away. They decided to stay for the time being to let things subside. Lucas took Princess Jade with him to a separate room, leaving Alaric on his own. Look at those two. Alaric could only wryly smile as he watched them leave the hall. He then went to find the Crown Prince, but the inn staff told him he had already left. He liked the Crown Prince because he was smart and tactful, unlike his younger brother, who was known for his terrible personality. Now that he was left alone, he went to his assigned room and pulled the cyan screen with a thought. Do you want to use your random trait upgrade card? Yes. No. I wonder what will be upgraded this time. A look of anticipation flashed in his eyes as he clicked yes. Congratulations. You have upgraded your horseback riding C to horseback riding B. Alaric laughed excitedly at the notification. This trait might sound common, but it was very useful for a warrior, especially for the cavalryman. In the next moment, new information flooded his mind. All sorts of techniques related to horseback riding were integrated into his system. It was a wondrous feeling that he would never get tired of. Took an entire minute before this magical sensation vanished. He was excited to check his progress, but he decided to use the other rewards he got. Which one should I use first? Alaric rubbed his hands while pondering deeply. He had an equipment upgrade card and the catastrophe grade steed card. Using the catastrophe grade card inside the capital might not be a good idea. I will keep this for now and use the other card first. He didn't know what kind of being he would summon if he used the card, so although he was a bit reluctant, he could only put the matter aside temporarily. So which equipment should I upgrade? Alaric rubbed his chin while laying down all his equipment in front of him. This was a tough decision to make since all items were of great assistance to him, especially the battle armor he received from Marquis Tyrone a few months ago. He had already upgraded it once, so he wondered how durable it would become if he were to upgrade it a second time. Just the thought of it made him excited. However, Alaric didn't rush to make a decision. This bracelet I got from my mother is also equally useful. Alaric picked up a bracelet. Linda Barnolay had given it to him when he first visited the unusual restaurant in Maleton. It was a gift from his birth mother, so it held significant value. This bracelet is engraved with a healing ability, so it will be crucial in near-death situations. Alaric put the bracelet down and grabbed the next item. It was the frigid dragon sword, which had already been upgraded to epic level. Upgrading this sword again is very tempting, but it would be too wasteful. With his current realm, he still couldn't use the short sword's full capabilities. If he were to upgrade it again, he didn't know when he would be able to use the sword to its full potential. Thinking about this, he decisively put down the sword. What a dilemma! He shook his head and exhaled a deep sigh. Alaric paced around his room while looking at the items lying on the floor. Almost half an hour later, he finally made a decision. Do you want to use your equipment upgrade card on the selected item? Yes. No. Alaric clicked yes. Congratulations. You have upgraded your rare healing bracelet to Epic Healing Bracelet. Epic Healing Bracelet. When equipped, it helps the wearer quickly recover from fatigue and mana loss. When the wearer takes life-threatening damage, will immediately discharge Ultimate Heal, S. Will enter a cooldown period of 1 month upon use of the skill. Looking at the information on the newly upgraded bracelet, Alaric grinned. According to Linda Barnolay, this bracelet was engraved with a healing ability that could only be used a limited number of times. Now, he could use the bracelet without limitations. The only minor issue was that he had to wait for a month for the skill to cool down. Not bad. Not bad at all. He couldn't stop himself from smiling after reading the upgraded bracelet's description. It had far exceeded his expectations. Time to check my progress. He opened his personal information to inspect his progress. Alaric Silver Sword Elite Knight, EXP. 535, 685/1000. Potential A.
Trait, Orse-Bas Cridin, B. Swordsmanship, SSS, Close Combat, B. Archerie, E. Intigne, E. Tracking, D. Sixth Sense, D. Monster Affinity, D. Mana Gathering, C. Appraisal, B.
Strength, 200. Stamina, 250. Agility, 220. Vitality, 195. Endurance, 198.
Mana, 250.
Battle points, 7,700, 10,000. Stat points, 20, 70. Requirements for the next advancement, 1,000 EXP, 250 in all attributes, and 10,000 battle points. Alaric was thrilled. He had reached his battle point requirement and he was already close to reaching his EXP requirement. His attributes were also nearing the maximum points required. No way. To think that I am already this close to advancing to the next realm. Unbelievable. Throughout the long history of Estania, he had never heard of anyone becoming a transcendent knight before turning 20. Even the most famous experts in the past didn't possess his godly breakthrough speed. Calm down. I need to calm down. Alaric took a deep breath to suppress his excitement. He was in a great mood, so he decided to visit his cousin, the princess, to celebrate. Inside the second prince's mansion, somewhere in Cadera. Bastard! A series of furious shouts echoed, scaring the servants and guards inside the big mansion. The second prince, Giovanni, was taking out his fury on his jade sculpture collection. Crack! Bang! His study room had become a mess, but his rage was far from being allayed. Giovanni turned his head at the cowering servant, his eyes looking like they could devour a human whole, and said in a cold voice, "Bring André here immediately." Chapter 323. The Emperor. A few days later, Princess Jade brought Lucas and Alaric to a restaurant owned by her subordinate. Come to think of it, how did His Highness manage to bring you out of the palace? Lucas asked all of a sudden. This has been bugging him in the last few days. He couldn't comprehend how the crown prince was able to bring Jade out of the palace when she was tightly guarded by powerful warriors. Hearing this, Alaric perked his ears and looked at his mother curiously. He was also baffled about this matter. Looking at their curious gazes, Princess Jade adjusted her sitting posture, her expression turning serious all of a sudden. She then cleared his throat and replied, "The matter is quite complicated. I am still not sure myself, but I have a few guesses." While saying this, she waved her hand to activate one of her integrated monster traits, a skill called Space Isolation. Alaric had already heard about this skill from his mother. It was quite a peculiar ability, but with the right usage, it could be lethal. At this moment, their conversation could no longer be heard by anyone. Even if someone was close by, they wouldn't be able to hear anything unless they stepped inside the targeted space of the spell. If an assassin were to use this ability, they would be able to kill their target without alerting anyone. Aside from this unique integrated monster trait, his mother also possessed two more powerful abilities. Jade Christine Estania, 3-ringed Beast Soul Master EXP, 1250/5000. Potential S. Integrated monster traits. Space Isolation, S. Clone, S. Spirit Blade Summoning, SS. Traits. Swordsmanship, S. Close Combat, S. Assassination, S. Disguise, A. Horseback Riding, A. Hunting, A. Breath Control, A. Painting, A. Cooking, E. Strength, 285. Stamina, 270. Agility, 315. Vitality, 291. Endurance, 199. Mana, 555. Other than her endurance, his mother's attributes were above those of an average transcendent knight. Furthermore, the integrated monster traits she possessed were all linked together. She is a beast soul warrior who has the physical abilities of a transcendent knight. Alaric was shocked when he first saw his mother's information through his appraisal. You mean that His Majesty is only faking an illness? Lucas was stunned, his eyes filled with disbelief. Hearing this, Alaric was pulled from his random thoughts. What are they talking about? Princess Jade shook her head. Like I said, I am not sure. This is only my guess based on the information I received from my subordinates. Lucas exhaled a deep breath. This was an earth-shaking matter. Let us say you are right. Why do you think His Majesty is faking an illness? He asked with a frown. He couldn't understand why the Emperor would do something like this. Princess Jade thought for a moment before she replied. I think His Majesty is trying to lure someone. The father and son duo were shaken by her words. Alaric recalled the events that happened in his past life. There were indeed a few baffling situations that occurred, but he was killed before he could make his investigations. Let us not talk about this. Princess Jade shook her head. We do not know for sure what His Majesty is planning. Everything will come to light one day, when the right time comes. Lucas no longer asked about the matter when he heard this. Our food is here. With a faint smile, Princess Jade clapped her hands. She then removed the space isolation. The family of three happily ate their meal while talking about other things. Inside the palace, on the top floor of the Imperial Library. Have you completed the task? The hall was dimly lit, but the silhouette of a man seated on what seemed to be a throne could be seen. His face was obscured by the darkness and only the lower half of his body was visible. Kneeling before him was an old man dressed in golden white battle armor. He had a head full of white hair and his face was covered in scars of all forms. With one look, anyone could tell that he had experienced numerous battles and survived them all. Yes, Your Majesty, Her Highness has been released. All that is left is for the fish to take the bait. The old warrior replied in a respectful tone. There was a brief moment of silence before the man on the throne spoke. Continue observing their movements and let me know immediately if there is something significant. This servant obeys. The old warrior was about to leave when the man on the throne suddenly stopped him. Hold on. Dominic turned around and stared curiously at the Emperor. Is there something else, Your Majesty? He asked. The Emperor stood up and steadily walked down the throne, revealing his face. He had short white hair and a pair of mixed golden cerulean eyes. At a glance, he looked like someone in his early 40s, but don't be fooled, for his real age was beyond what it seemed to be. The Emperor hesitated for a moment before he asked with an indifferent tone. About the kid, Alaric. What do you think of him? Dominic was taken aback. He didn't expect the Emperor to show interest in his nephew. I haven't observed him clearly, but based on what I have seen thus far, he has the makings of a great leader. He spoke his true feelings. He had secretly investigated Alaric and even observed him for quite some time. He found out that Alaric was far from just being a swordsmanship prodigy. The Emperor raised an eyebrow. Is that so? He turned his body sideways with his hands behind his back. Send him a dragon guard. Dominic was stunned. This? The Dragon Guards were warriors loyal only to the Emperor. They were highly skilled fighters who had been trained since they were young. However, the reason he was shocked was that the Emperor had only sent the Shadow Guards to the heirs to the throne. Chapter 324. Leaving the capital. The Emperor had 20 Dragon Guards under his command, and each of them was a transcendent knight. Of these 20 powerful warriors, only 3 were recorded in the Estanian Dragon leaderboard. The rest were hidden from the public, and only a handful of people knew they existed. Which of them should I send to Lord Alaric? Dominic hesitantly asked. The Dragon Guards were transcendents, but they weren't of equal strength. He wanted to know which Dragon Guard the Emperor would choose for Alaric. The Emperor took a few seconds to pause before he responded. Send Redden to his side. That guy has been complaining a lot lately. Might as well send him to the north so the palace can finally be quiet. Hearing this, Dominic was stunned. Redden was the deputy commander of the Dragon Guards, and his strength was only slightly beneath that of their commander. Sending him to Alaric meant that the Emperor held his nephew in high regard. As for the Emperor's random excuse, he didn't treat it seriously. Seeing that he was silent, the Emperor stared at him with a reprimanding look and said, "What are you waiting for? Go and send that loudmouth out of my palace." "Yes, Your Majesty." Dominic no longer dallied. He bowed to the Emperor and left with haste. The Emperor watched him leave with a thoughtful look before he returned to his throne. A day later, a large group gathered at the main gate of the capital to send off Lucas' family. The arrogant nobles who hadn't shown themselves when they arrived were now wearing flattering smiles as they bid them farewell. Looking at these two-faced aristocrats, Alaric sneered in his mind. At this moment, he suddenly noticed someone approaching him. It was the Crown Prince Exler Estania. "Lord Alaric, let us meet again sometime." He took the initiative to shake hands with him. Alaric had a good impression of this guy. "I would love that, Your Highness. If you have some free time, you can visit me in North Pine Town." "All right." The Crown Prince nodded while beaming at him. "Alaric." A sad voice drifted into their ears. They turned their heads and saw the princess walking towards them with a gloomy face. "Your Highness." Alaric smiled at her. This cousin of his might be a little annoying at times, but she was someone he could count on. "When will you come back to the capital?" she asked, slightly fidgeting. "I am not sure." Alaric shook his head with a sigh. The princess frowned upon hearing this. "You owe me one. You must come here when I tell you to." She snorted. Alaric let out a wry smile. He knew what she was talking about, so he readily agreed. "Yes, Your Highness. As long as things are good on my side, I will answer your summons immediately." The group exchanged a few more words before Lucas brought everyone to leave. Inside the carriage, Princess Jade could no longer conceal her worry. She frowned and muttered with a look of concern. "Soon, everyone will come to know Alaric's true identity. I am afraid that there might be nobles who will try to use him to get some benefits for themselves." Lucas, who was sitting next to her, gently grabbed her hand upon hearing this. "You can rest assured. I will protect our son and our family." Princess Jade sighed while shaking her head. Although Lucas was already a mythical knight, she still couldn't stop herself from worrying. "There is still Haroun that we should watch out for," she thought, but she didn't dare mention it. "My lord, my lady, I'm sorry for disturbing you, but there is someone suspicious following us. How should we deal with him?" William's voice echoed from outside the carriage. Hearing this, Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Send someone to speak with him. If he does not have good intentions, eliminate him immediately." "Yes, my lord." William acknowledged the command. After William left, Lucas released his spiritual perception to take a look at the person following them. A transcendent knight. He frowned when he sensed the man's strength. What is his motive? Seeing the sudden change in his expression, Alaric, who was seated opposite his parents, asked curiously, "Is there something wrong with that person, Dad?" Lucas exhaled a breath as he replied in a stern voice. "He is a transcendent knight, one who is a lot stronger than Sir William." Hearing this, Alaric revealed a look of interest. Why would a transcendent knight follow us? A moment later, William returned and reported. My lord, the man said that he wants to speak with Lord Alaric. Alaric was taken aback. You may go. I will keep watch. Lucas sent him an encouraging nod. Princess Jade furrowed her eyebrows, but knowing that her son had the bracelet she had given him, she felt reassured. Even if something were to happen, the bracelet would be able to protect his life. All right. Alaric nodded and stepped out of the carriage. William brought him his mount and said, You can wait here, my lord. I will bring him here. There is no need. Alaric jumped onto the horse and grabbed the reins before squeezing his legs, urging it to move. William was worried, so he quietly followed behind him. He also sent a signal to his subordinates to keep an eye on the mysterious man. Alaric could already see the stranger. He was riding his mount, marching alongside their entourage. It was a gaunt-faced, middle-aged man with long, wavy auburn hair. He had a pair of sleepy eyes that revealed unconcealed boredom. If it weren't for his gaudy battle armor, Alaric would have mistaken him for a drunkard. The man glanced in his direction and gave him a once-over. Are you Lord Alaric? His tone sounded a bit rude, which made William and the other warriors frown. Alaric didn't seem to mind this, for he had already discovered that this man was not your average warrior. That is right. Alaric nodded with a faint smile. Chapter 325. Redden, Deputy Commander of the Dragon Guards. Hearing his confirmation, the man lowered his head and respectfully handed him a token. My name is Redden, my lord. I have been tasked to protect you. Alaric glanced at the token, which contained the words, Dragon Guard. This is a token that only members of the Dragon Guards possess. Thinking about this, he sized up the man who had introduced himself as Redden. No wonder his attributes are surprisingly high. Turns out he is part of that secret unit. In his past life, he had only stumbled upon this information while he was working on a mission for the Crown Prince. From what he knew, the Dragon Guards were only sent to the heirs of the throne. The Crown Prince had one and the second prince also had one. Now, a Dragon Guard has sent himself to his doorstep. Who sent you? Alaric stared deeply at Redden. I don't know if you've heard of him, my lord. His name is Dominic. Redden replied without concealing anything. Hearing this, Alaric was shocked. He had seen Dominic once in the Imperial Library, and from that encounter, he could tell that Dominic held an important position in the Empire. Don't tell me I have been recognized as an heir. Alaric could already smell trouble coming his way. You said that you were tasked to protect me. Does that mean that you will follow me around? He asked while secretly thinking about how he could utilize this man. Redden nodded. Yes, my lord. If you have any instructions, I will also fulfill them to the best of my abilities. So this is the son of Princess Jade and Lucas Silversword. He looks fragile. Is he really as strong as the rumors say? He had heard of some rumors about Alaric, but he found them exaggerated. All right, you can follow us, but you should explain your situation to my parents. Alaric suggested. This was a free transcendent knight. Although his loyalty was questionable, Alaric already had some ideas on how he should get this man to join their side. Redden acknowledged his command. He then went to report his situation to Lucas and Princess Jade. A Dragon Guard? Lucas frowned. As someone who had once worked for the Emperor, he was familiar with this secret unit. They had rarely been sent out for a mission, and their whereabouts were kept strictly confidential. Princess Jade was similarly surprised, but the presence of the Dragon Guard also confirmed her suspicions about the Emperor's health. It seems like my guess is right. I will allow you to follow us, but you will no longer be a member of the Dragon Guards. Lucas spoke in a serious tone. Redden had already received Dominic's directives, so he nodded his head. From the moment they sent me to follow Lord Alaric, I'm already aware that I am no longer part of the Dragon Guards. You can rest assured, my lord. Good. From now on, you will be a warrior of House Silversword. Lucas knew of the Dragon Guard's strict rules, so he wasn't worried that Redden would cause them trouble. Even if something were to happen, Alaric had Galliner who would protect him from unexpected situations. What do you think, Jade? He looked at Jade to hear her opinion. It should be fine. The dragon guards are carefully selected by Lord Dominic. They will never do something that will compromise the safety of the imperial family. Jade voiced out her agreement to his decisions. And with that, House Silversword gained another transcendent knight. In the next few days, news about Alaric's true identity spread across the empire. Many were shocked by the unexpected revelation. Some aristocrats even sent delegates to North Pinetown to offer gifts to the new prince. Meanwhile, in Ryvad, Baron Nathan was pleasantly surprised when he got wind of this information. "Oh my God! My son-in-law is actually a prince. Ha ha ha!" He laughed joyously. "What? Lord Alaric is actually a prince?" Theo, his eldest son, exclaimed upon hearing this. Nathan glared at him and immediately corrected his son. "What do you mean, Lord? You must call him Your Highness the next time you see him." Theo could sense the joy in his father's words as if he were excited about the whole matter. "Yes, Dad." He smiled wryly while nodding his head. "They are returning to North Pinetown, right?" Baron Nathan asked while rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Yes, but why do you ask?" Theo immediately shut his mouth. He could already tell that his father was planning something again. He isn't thinking of showing off to his friends, right? I hope I'm wrong. Go and write a letter to my friends. Tell them to come with me to North Pinetown so that we can pay our respects to His Highness. Baron Nathan beamed. Theo's face twitched at his words. "I knew it. Yes, my lord." He couldn't disobey his father's orders, so he could only reluctantly nod his head. Other than House Paxley, almost all of the northern houses had similar thoughts. Now that it has been confirmed that Alaric was a prince, they strengthened their resolve to follow House Silversword. They quickly sent their representatives to North Pinetown, with some of them even going as far as sending their own daughters and granddaughters, clearly with hidden agendas in mind. Alaric was unaware that his identity would soon cause him so much trouble. It has been 10 days since they left Cadera and they had just crossed Vale. In an hour or so, they would finally reach North Pinetown. The journey was smooth and they didn't encounter any problems along the way. However, the carriage suddenly stopped. "My lord, there is a group of nobles approaching us. Do you want me to send them away?" William's voice echoed. Hearing this, Lucas frowned. "It seems like they already know Alaric's identity," he muttered with a deep sigh. These people were mostly their subordinate houses, so it wouldn't be appropriate to send them away. After much thought, he replied, "Just leave them be." "Yes, my lord."
Chapter 326, Embarems.
By the time they arrived in town, the size of their entourage had almost doubled, as the delegates of the northern houses joined them. The townspeople were stunned upon seeing them, and they even thought that there was another event coming. What is going on? Why are there so many aristocrats in the town? Haven't you heard? Lord Alaric's real mother is His Majesty's sister, which makes him a prince of Estania. Then wouldn't that mean that we have to call him His Highness now? The residents discussed in groups of 4 or more as they watched the entourage head straight to House Silversword's estate. At this moment, Alaric was inside the carriage with his parents, his face looking incredibly annoyed. These people really have to come now. How am I supposed to use that catastrophe-grade steed card with this many eyewitnesses? He was exasperated. He didn't even bother to conceal his feelings. "You might have to get used to it soon, son. With your identity, there will be many people who would want to get closer to you. You just have to be careful about whom you should trust." Lucas reminded him. Alaric let out a deep sigh as he nodded his head. "I understand, Dad. So this is what those 2 cousins of mine have to deal with as the heirs to the throne. Now, I understand why the Crown Prince rarely showed himself to the public." Soon, they finally arrived at the estate. Waiting in front of the main gate was Maria, whose belly had grown noticeably bigger. Other than her, Hershey, Elena, and a few others were also present. Princess Jade looked visibly nervous when she saw Maria. She had a vast network of information, so she was aware of what was happening in North Pinetown. Maria was someone who had always stayed with Lucas and Alaric during her absence. Although Alaric wasn't her own son, she took care of him and treated him like her own blood. Jade was grateful for her efforts and sacrifices. It will be all right, Lucas whispered with a faint smile as he grabbed her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. Amen. Princess Jade hummed in response. Let's go. We can't let them stand in the middle of this heat. Lucas told them before he stepped out of the carriage. Princess Jade followed him and Alaric was the last to get off. We are glad to see you safe. Maria approached them with a gentle smile. She then embraced Lucas and Alaric. While she was hugging them, she noticed Princess Jade staring at them awkwardly. Jade, what are you standing there for? Come here and join us. Maria called out to her, beaming. Jade no longer hesitated. With a relieved smile, she walked towards them and joined the group hug. All this time, she was worried that Maria would make things difficult for her. But it seemed like her worries were unnecessary. Maria was a lot more understanding than she had imagined. It made her ashamed that she had thought badly of her. Alaric extricated himself from the group hug and walked towards Hershey. Did you miss me? Hershey dove into his arms and replied with an affectionate tone. Every day I always think of you. Hearing this, Alaric smiled and hugged her even tighter. After exchanging sweet words with his wife, he then turned his head to Elena, who was staring at them with unblinking eyes. Hello, Elena. How have you been? He greeted her with a smile. The young maid became more sensible. She no longer acted coyly in front of him. She lowered her head and replied, I have been doing well, my lord. Thank you for asking. Looking at the sudden change in her demeanor and etiquette, Alaric was taken aback. Elena wanted to learn proper etiquette, so I taught her a few things. She is a quick learner. It only took her 2 weeks to master the basics. Hershey remarked, clearly proud to see her growth. I see. So you have been working hard all this time. Alaric wanted to pat Elena's head, but he felt that it was no longer appropriate, so he quickly took back his hand. I am still very lacking, my lord. Elena humbly replied, but Alaric noticed her ears reddening from the compliment. He then greeted the rest of the group who had come to wait for them. Surprisingly, Azazel was still around. He had given the demonkin the choice to leave the town if he deemed it unworthy, but from the looks of it, he had already made his decision. Sensing his gaze, Azazel gave him a polite nod, to which Alaric reciprocated with a smile. This guy actually chose to stay. Perhaps it isn't just because of the town, but also because of her. Thinking about this, he looked at the young maid standing next to Elena. It was Faye, an illegitimate child of an aristocrat who was sold in the Crimson Tower as a slave. She still looked shy and timid when he first saw her. Only a few weeks had passed since she came here, but her complexion had significantly improved. Your Highness, we came to pay our respects. A familiar voice suddenly drifted into his ears. Dad. Hershey was taken aback when he saw her father leading a small group of nobles. Baron Nathan beamed at his daughter. My lord, you don't need to be formal with me. You can just call me by my name. Alaric glanced at his father-in-law with a wry smile. Baron Baton shook his head, grinning from ear to ear. How could I do that, your highness? You have the bloodline of the imperial family running through your veins. Theo, who was standing behind the group, was embarrassed to see his father acting like this. He covered his face with his hand and mumbled while shaking his head. So embarrassing. We should head in, everyone. My wife is pregnant, so it is not suitable for her to stay in the middle of this heat for a long time. Lucas's voice echoed. Yes, Lord Venerable. Chapter 327. Zephyr. Lucas invited all the guests to the building where they hosted Alaric's wedding. He couldn't bring them to the main mansion since there were dozens of them who had gathered. While Lucas was entertaining the guests, Alaric snuck out and headed to a secluded spot. He looked around, making sure that no one was nearby. Earlier, Redden insisted on following him, but Alaric told him not to follow for he would do something private. Luckily for him, the former deputy commander of the Dragon Guards listened to his instructions. I can finally use that thing. He excitedly opened the science screen with a thought. Do you want to use the catastrophe grade steed card? Yes. No. Alaric rubbed his hands, wondering what kind of beast the card would summon. With great anticipation, he clicked, yes. A blinding light flashed in front of him, forcing him to close his eyes. Whoosh! He suddenly felt a warm breath blowing through his skin, followed by a snorting sound. Alaric opened his eyes and saw a creature that was as big as an elephant. It had a dragon-like head, the body of a lion, and a pair of feathered white wings on its back. With one glance, he could already identify what it was. A draconic lion? It was a creature known for its terrible temper and extremely territorial nature. According to what he knew, a juvenile draconic lion possessed the strength of a transcendent knight. However, the beast in front of him was clearly an adult draconic lion. My goodness! It actually summoned this beast. Furthermore, it is an adult. Alaric exclaimed in shock and excitement. An adult draconic lion was a fearsome beast of nature. It had physical strength equivalent to that of a mythical knight. Moreover, it also had a high affinity with wind, a flying mount that possessed the strength of a mythical knight. Alaric grinned as he looked at the majestic creature. It was surprisingly docile. When it sensed Alaric's gaze, it lowered its draconic head and gently nudged his chest. Alaric was a bit nervous. He almost thought that the beast would bite his head off. He hesitantly touched its head while observing its reaction. The beast seemed to enjoy his touch, making his worries fade away. He rubbed its thick fur and whispered, "I think I should give you a name." Let's see." Alaric thought for a moment while rubbing his chin. "You look like a gentle male draconic lion, so let's go with Zephyr." He gave it the first name that came to his mind. The beast revealed a look of joy after Alaric bestowed it with a name. Catastrophe-grade monsters are indeed more intelligent. "Alaric, what is going on here?" Lucas's shocked voice drifted into his ears. He sensed the presence of a powerful monster, so he quickly came here to check the situation. Alaric stared at his father, unable to respond for a while. I just went out for some sword training when I discovered this beast. I thought it was friendly, so I approached it." He forced out a smile. "You thought it was friendly?" Lucas's face twitched when he heard his response. He could feel that his son was hiding a big secret, but he decided not to probe into it. "Son, that is an adult draconic lion," he reminded him with a stern look. "This beast, I think it is a bit stronger than I am." He felt cold sweat on his back as he looked at the beast. He didn't dare reveal his aggression for fear of alerting it. He was afraid that it would harm his son if he showed even a bit of hostility. "I know. You can relax, Dad. I think this creature means no harm. Besides, I feel a strong connection with it." Alaric sent his father a reassuring look. Hearing this, Lucas raised an eyebrow. There were a handful of people who had the innate ability to communicate with monsters. They were known to everyone as beast tamers or beast whisperers. House Silversword also had one such individual, Cassius. Don't tell me my son has the same gift as Cassius. He couldn't think of any other explanation. Still feeling doubtful, he cautiously approached the creature. "Are you saying that it won't harm anyone?" Alaric nodded with a faint smile. "I assure you that it will not attack anyone." "Well, if they provoke it." He didn't continue the remaining words and chuckled meaningfully. Lucas understood his words. "Can you command this beast?" he probed. If Alaric could control this draconic lion, House Silversword would gain a powerful guardian beast. Looking at how cautious his father was, Alaric was secretly amused, but he couldn't blame him. After all, this creature could trample multiple cities if it wanted to. It could even destroy a small kingdom. To ease his father's worries, Alaric knew that he had to prove his words. "I haven't tested it out yet, but I think Zephyr should be able to understand my words." "Zephyr, sit down." Alaric made a hand gesture to the beast. To Lucas's amazement, the draconic lion actually obeyed Alaric's command. "Do you believe me now, Dad?" Alaric grinned at him. Lucas shook his head with a nervous smile. "If I had not seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it." Alaric chuckled at his words. "What are you planning to do with it?" Lucas asked. The beast was powerful enough to deter a small nation, so having it to guard their estate would be reassuring. Alaric could already see through Lucas' thoughts. With a carefree smile, he replied, I will take care of it. Making it guard the mansion would be nice too. Lucas supported his idea, but he was still worried that it might attack someone, so he reminded Alaric. Since you plan to take care of it, you must be responsible for its actions. You must give it proper training so it will not harm anyone. Do you understand? Alaric nodded. You can rest assured, Dad. Good. Lucas glanced at the beast and asked, What's its name again? Yes, it's Zephyr. Alaric beamed. Chapter 328. Getting used to his life as a prince. Several months passed by in the blink of an eye and things had already begun to settle down. Alaric was also starting to get used to his imperial identity. It was the 29th of November, in the year 209 of the Estanian calendar. At this moment, within the training grounds of House Silversword, the sweaty-faced Alaric had just completed his daily mission. It has been a while since I got a mission, but with my efforts, I am finally close to advancing to the next realm. He thought to himself as he inspected his status panel. Alaric Silversword, Elite Knight, EXP. 997/1000. Potential A.
Trait, Orse Bacridin, B. Swordsmanship, SSS, Close Combat, B. Archerie, D. Intigne, D. Tracking, C. Sixth Sense, C. Monster Affinity, C. Managathering, C. Appraisal, B.
Strength, 250. Stamina, 250. Agility, 250. Vitality, 247. Endurance, 250.
Mana, 250.
Battle points, 10,000. Stat points, 0. Requirements for the next advancement: 1,000 EXP, 250 in all attributes, and 10,000 battle points. Your Highness, please drink this fresh mango juice. Elena's voice drifted into his ears. Alaric turned his head and smiled faintly at her. He took the glass of mango juice she had prepared and drank everything in 3 large gulps. He felt refreshed and energized. What is my next schedule? He asked as he handed the empty glass back to her. This time, Henry, who was standing next to Elena, responded. You have a meeting with the Northern Lords this afternoon in Vale, Your Highness. Hearing this, Alaric nodded. Prepare my carriage. We will head to Vale in an hour. Henry acknowledged his command with a bow. Your servant obeys. After relaying his instructions, Alaric took off his training gear and headed to the main mansion for a quick bath. Elena quietly followed behind him. Along the way, they encountered a bunch of servants and guards who enthusiastically greeted him. Your Highness! Greetings, Your Highness! Alaric still found his new title a bit awkward, but it began to sound natural as the days went by. He headed to the bathroom. Inside, a pair of naked female servants helped him undress. Both were gorgeous young women at the prime of their youth. They had been specifically chosen by Hershey to help her husband with his daily needs. At first, Alaric was averse to the idea, but he soon relented under Hershey's insistence. According to her, a prince should take care of his image, so it was necessary for him to have servants at his side. Looking at the young women before him, Alaric could only sigh with a complicated expression on his face. Is there something wrong, Your Highness? One of the young women asked, looking at him with concern. The other one didn't say anything, but she also stared at him, waiting to hear his response. At her query, Alaric shook his head with a light smile. It's nothing. He then jumped into the pool and submerged himself in the water to cool off his muscles and nerves. The 2 female servants followed him. One kneaded his back, while the other applied soap to his chest. Is it a sin to enjoy this life of luxury? It would be a lie to say that he didn't like this treatment. Which normal man didn't dream of this kind of life? Suddenly, one of the girls grabbed his member, making it stand proudly like a spear. Your Highness, do you want me to clean up your... Her intentions were clear. He hadn't even responded yet, but her hands were already stroking him with practiced movements. Alaric didn't respond, but he didn't reject her either, so the girl continued with her task, smiling coyly at him. Since when did I become this corrupt? More than 30 minutes later, with the joint efforts of the two young ladies, Alaric finally shot his load all over their faces. After taking a bath, he wrapped himself in a bathrobe. He then told the two servants, "I will get changed on my own. You two should head back to your rooms to get dressed." "Yes, Your Highness." Alaric headed to his walk-in wardrobe and chose a relatively formal outfit. It was one of the many imperial garments he had received from the crown prince as a gift. "Knock, knock, knock. It's me." Hershey's voice echoed from behind the door. Hearing this, Alaric paused for a moment and said, "Come in." "The door isn't locked." Creak. Hershey stepped inside the room, smiling as she approached him. "I heard that you are heading to Vale to meet the Northern Lords. Do you want me to accompany you there?" She noticed a few creases on his clothes, so she helped him smooth them over. Alaric grabbed her soft hand and gave it a kiss. "Of course. Otherwise, those cunning old men might dupe your husband," he replied jokingly. Hershey giggled at his words. "Then I will come with you." The two exchanged sweet nothings before they headed out of the mansion. In front of the main door, their carriage has already been prepared. Henry had also arranged a team of skilled warriors to escort them. "Your Highness, everything has been prepared. Are we setting off now?" Henry inquired with a respectful look. Alaric didn't respond right away. He observed the team that would escort them and inspected them one by one. They were the first batch of warriors who had undergone rigorous training. A year had passed since they began their training, and all of them had already become knight apprentices. A few of them even showed signs of advancing to the knight realm. This kind of breakthrough speed was only possible because of the overflowing resources they had taken. The one who showed the fastest growth was Wolf, the young boy he had met in Mount Tejera when he visited the tombs of the fallen warriors. He displayed his overwhelming potential and quickly surpassed his peers, rising like the stars in the sky. Other than him, Renanti, Rasmus, and Aaliyah also showed great talent. He knew that these young warriors would soon become cornerstone figures of House Silversword. With a calm look, Alaric said, "Let's go." Chapter 329. Attack on the Western Borders? With the mighty Galliner and the experienced Henry leading the entourage, everyone felt safe. You must be careful when you make promises to those lords. They are crafty individuals, so they might try to make use of your new status for their own benefit. Hershey reminded him with a stern voice. Alaric nodded in agreement. After being named as the third heir to the crown, Alaric had been invited to numerous occasions. Initially, he found these noble gatherings unnecessary, but he knew that he had to establish a strong connection with their subordinate houses. If it weren't for these troublesome social events, he would have already become a transcendent knight. Hershey gave him a few more reminders to which he took note of. He wasn't the kind of man used to these things, so having her with him was reassuring. Soon, they arrived at the entrance of Vale, where a group of officials were already waiting for them. "We greet your Highness." Everyone greeted him enthusiastically. They had made strict preparations before his arrival to ensure that he would get the best treatment possible. Facing their passionate welcome, Alaric didn't give much of a reaction. He stayed inside his carriage and waved at the people outside. If it were before, he would have stepped out of his carriage to greet those people, but he could no longer do that since he would have a hard time extricating himself from the crowd. Vale's officials brought them to the meeting location, an obscure restaurant created solely for important gatherings. Alaric and Hershey stepped out of the carriage. Under the heated gazes of the city officials and northern lords, the couple walked along the red carpet prepared for them. Alaric felt stuffy in his imperial garments, but he didn't show any signs of discomfort outwardly. "Tell the seamstress to adjust my clothes once we return to the estate," he whispered to his wife. Hearing this, Hershey nodded. "All right." Her husband has been diligent in his training despite his busy schedule. Because of his efforts, his frame had grown noticeably bigger than it was a few months ago. A moment later, they entered the largest private room in the restaurant. It was like a huge hall which was spacious enough to accommodate 100 guests. Upon entering the private room, Alaric saw about 20 old men and women standing with serious faces while looking at him. "Greetings, Your Highness." Everyone bowed to him without exception. Alaric returned their greeting with a simple nod of his head. He noticed that they were waiting for him to sit, so he didn't dawdle. He took his seat and gestured for everyone to sit down. "Let us begin the meeting," he announced with a dignified voice. The meeting was mostly about some important issues in the northern region. Things like territorial disputes, resource gathering, or beast horse attacks were mentioned. As he listened, Alaric realized that he wasn't cut out for this thing. Not even 10 minutes had passed, but he was already feeling sleepy and bored. "I would rather attack a goblin colony than sit in front of these northern lords," he sighed in his heart. Although he had much to complain about, Alaric still completed his duties. "Your Highness, there is one last thing. This is also the most important," spoke Argus, one of the northern lords who had first submitted to House Silversword. Hearing this, Alaric furrowed his eyebrows and gestured for the old man to continue. Argus cleared his throat and said with a grave look, "Lately, there has been growing concern about the increase in the number of foreign spies." The northern lords quieted down when they heard this. They knew that Alaric's birth mother, Princess Jade, had an arranged marriage with a prince from Haroon. Everyone was worried that the spies they captured were connected to Haroon. "We tried interrogating those spies, but they refused to talk even when they were being tortured," Argus added, his face looking grim. "What are you trying to say?" Alaric stared deeply at him. Argus took a deep breath and replied, "Your Highness, there is a high chance that those people are sent by Haroon to observe the northern region." Alaric frowned. He was also aware of this matter. In fact, he had already confirmed their identity after they captured some of those said people. He adjusted his sitting posture and thought for a moment when a notification suddenly popped up in front of him. Seeing this, he immediately instructed, "Increase the number of warriors stationed on our borders. Also, communicate with the city officials to do inspections on the residents." A few northern lords knitted their eyebrows. "Your Highness, doing this would make the residents feel anxious." Alaric raised his hand, stopping the man from speaking mid-sentence. With a serious expression, he muttered, "Haroon has already made a move." "What?" Everyone's faces became unsightly when they heard his words. Under, sir. Mission. Send reinforcements to the western borders. Mission difficulty, hard. Haroon has set out to invade the western borders of Estania. If nothing is done, 5 cities will be destroyed and hundreds of thousands of lives will be lost. Rewards: 1,000 battle points, 50 XP, 50 stat points. Random trait card X1. Under, sir. Haroon will attack our western borders, so we must send them reinforcements immediately. Alaric commanded with a flourish of his sleeves. The northern lords gasped in shock. Looking at his serious face, they realized that he wasn't joking. Communicate with the other northern lords to form a reinforcement army that will be sent to the western borders. Once they are ready, they must make haste to help the south defend our nation. We will follow your commands, Your Highness. Everything was too sudden, but the northern lords readily agreed to his orders. They had witnessed Alaric's strength and unbelievable breakthrough speed, so they developed a strong sense of respect for him. The meeting ended abruptly and everyone quickly made their way back to their territories to relay the news. "Haroon, how dare you attack my country?" Alaric's eyes flashed with ferocity as he stepped out of the restaurant. Chapter 330. Getting Lucas's approval to mobilize the troops. Alaric hurried to North Pinetown to tell his father the news. He still needed Lucas's approval to mobilize the household's troops. At this moment, Alaric's face was unreadable. Hershey, who was seated next to him, was worried when she saw his expression. She had rarely seen her husband like this since they got married. She wanted to say something, but she decided to stay quiet when she realized that he was in deep thought. Meanwhile, Alaric was mulling over the mission at hand. "This had never happened in my past life. At least not this early. Haroon's attack was supposed to happen a few years from now, but something seemed to have changed. It should because we took Mom from the Imperial Palace. His mother, Princess Jade, was set to marry the Prince of Haroon. But House Silversword had taken her from the imperial castle, and Lucas even announced to the world that she was his woman. Harun must have felt embarrassed and humiliated because of this, so they launched an attack on the western borders of Estania, probably as retaliation. A few obscure things from his past life suddenly became clear to him. The Emperor. Did he really die due to his poor health? The Emperor was a mythical knight, a being of superior power. How could a formidable man like him fall sick? Thinking about this, Alaric rubbed his temples and let out a heavy sigh. This was no longer important. The most pressing matter was to complete the system mission and prevent the destruction of the western cities. As soon as they returned to the estate, Alaric headed straight to his father's study to report the situation. He didn't have evidence of this information, so he could only hope that Lucas would believe him. However, it seemed like he had underestimated his father's trust in him. So they chose to attack the western borders, where our military is the weakest. Lucas muttered after hearing Alaric's report. Alaric didn't say anything and quietly waited for his father to make the decision. He believed that his father wouldn't sit still, knowing that this attack was highly likely related to them. How many troops are available to be dispatched? Lucas asked with a deep look. He had been busy with the expansion of North Pine Town, so he wasn't updated on the household's military activities. Alaric thought for a moment before giving his response. Most of our warriors are stationed at the newly conquered lands on the southern edges of the town. That place is teeming with highly dangerous monsters, so we can't recall the troops stationed there. Sir William and his subordinates are also monitoring the situation in the mine. House Silversword now had over 4,000 soldiers, which was more than 10 times the size of their military a year ago. Of course, the reason for the big increase in their military personnel was because of Princess Jade. Just the people she had brought along were easily over 1,500. The size of their army was no longer a normal baron could have. But the imperial family turned a blind eye to this, probably out of consideration for Princess Jade and Alaric. If the emperor were around, he might have already bestowed Lucas with a higher title, but he didn't seem to have the intention of revealing himself anytime soon. At most, we can only gather a little more than 1,000 warriors led by 6 transcendents. Alaric gave him a rough estimate. 6 transcendents? Lucas was stunned when he heard this. Do we have that many transcendents available? Excluding my personal troops, there is Galliner, Warwick, the Demonkin Azazel, the former deputy commander of the Dragon Guards Redden, and Butch, who had recently advanced. It shouldn't be William since he is at the mine. Looking at his father's baffled look, Alaric chuckled. I will give you a big surprise tomorrow. Hearing this, Lucas raised an eyebrow. Is it Cassius? The retired elite knight had lost an arm in his last battle more than a decade ago, but with the arrival of Samaya, who had the ultimate heal-integrated monster trait, his limb had been regrown. Cassius was no longer dispirited, and he even occasionally trained with the soldiers in the training ground. However, the old man hadn't mentioned anything about leaving the Beast Garden. Alaric didn't answer him and just smiled mysteriously. Lucas's face twitched when he saw his son's face. Fine, I will not ask. Just go and gather the troops. He waved his hand impatiently. After getting his father's approval, Alaric thanked him and left immediately. Upon stepping out of his father's study, he saw Hershey waiting for him outside. Honey, why are you here? He asked, looking at her in surprise. Hershey didn't respond. She stared at him and asked with a serious voice, Are you planning to go to the western borders? Alaric's gaze softened upon hearing her query. He felt guilty for always being away, but this was something he ought to do. I must go there. Looking at his determined expression, Hershey forced out a smile. She was worried about his safety, but knowing her husband's personality, she knew that he had already made up his mind. Then you must be careful out there. I will handle all your tasks here, so you can put your mind at ease. Alaric took her in his embrace. You should be careful too, he whispered. Amen. I have Cassandra and Lyanna at my side, she assured him. Both women were elite knights, and he had also selected 20 skilled warriors to protect her. Furthermore, Lucas would stay in the town, so she would be safe as long as she didn't leave the territory. After coaxing his wife, Alaric went out of the main mansion and summoned all the available military officers, including the Transcendents under his command. In less than 30 minutes, over 1,000 troops stood before him, waiting to hear his instructions. Chapter 331. Title at the end. Alaric looked at the warriors before him and felt a bit emotional. A year ago, he couldn't even command more than 50 warriors, but in front of him now stood 1,000 fierce warriors. Moreover, this still wasn't the full strength of House Silversword. As we speak, the soldiers of Harun are marching towards the western borders of our nation, he announced with a grim voice. His words made everyone frown. Their goal is to slaughter our countrymen and turn. Alaric had already prepared his speech before coming here. This was necessary to invoke the fighting spirit of his troops. Looking at the agitated soldiers, Alaric knew that his desired outcome had been fulfilled. Now it was time to give them the mission. All of you will follow me to the western borders. We must stop the invaders from attacking our lands. We will follow your highness, the warriors replied sonorously. Alaric was pleased. He then told them to inform their families about their departure before he dismissed them, excluding the demonkin, Azazel. How was your stay in the town? Alaric asked him with a faint smile. Azazel still had his usual gloomy look, but his face had noticeably become more radiant. Thanks to your highness' efforts, the residents are no longer afraid of me, Azazel replied in a respectful tone. Alaric had never neglected him. He educated the people and told them that Azazel was different from the demonkins mentioned in the books. Because of his efforts, the townspeople gradually accepted Azazel. Although some still held prejudices toward him, the situation was a lot better than when he first arrived in the town. I am glad to hear that. Alaric nodded. For this mission in the western borders, I plan to bring you to inform everyone that you are already one of us. Hearing this, the demonkin was surprised. It took more than 3 months to convince the residents of North Pine Town, so he was uncertain whether Alaric's plan would work. However, the fact that Alaric had thought of his well-being made him immensely grateful. Thank you, my lord. He had already made his choice to follow this man. Alaric tapped his shoulder and smiled lightly. It is what I should do. He talked with the demonkin about other matters before he sent him off. The next day, before the sun had risen, Alaric headed to the training ground to complete his daily mission. It's time to advance to the next realm. His eyes gleamed with anticipation as he began his weighted exercises. 1,000 weighted push-ups ballot box with check. 1,000 weighted pull-ups ballot box with check. 1,000 weighted squats ballot box with check. 1 hour weighted planking ballot box with check. After completing the first set, he moved to the next part, which was the mana-infused sword training. He had already lost count of how many times he had done these exercises, so he no longer felt tired when executing them. 1,000 mana-infused vertical slashes ballot box with check.
1000 mana infuset horizontal slashes kotak pilihan bertanda centang 2. 1000 mana infuset diagonal slashes kotak pilihan bertanda centang 2. 1000 mana infuset stabs kotak pilihan bertanda centang 2.
You received 20 battle points. You received 3 EXP. You received 3 stat points. Alaric immediately distributed his stat points to his vitality. You have reached the requirements for your next advancement. Do you want to use 10,000 battle points to advance? Seeing this, Alaric didn't hesitate and excitedly clicked, yes. You have been promoted to the Transcendent Knight realm. Alaric Silversword, Transcendent Knight EXP, 0/5000. Potential as traits, horseback riding B, swordsmanship, SSS, close combat B, archery D, hunting D, tracking C, sixth sense C, monster affinity C, mana gathering C, appraisal B, strength 250, 300, stamina 250, 300, agility 250, 300, vitality 250, 300, endurance 250, 300.
Mana, 250, 300.
Battle points, 0. Stat points, 0. Requirements for the next advancement: 5,000 EXP, 500 in all attributes, and 25,000 battle points. With his breakthrough, an oppressive aura suddenly burst forth, alerting the warriors on duty. In the next moment, almost 100 warriors arrived at the training ground to inspect the situation, but they were shocked when they realized where the aura came from. His Highness has advanced. Transcendent Knight before the age of 20? Everyone gasped in disbelief as they watched the sweaty-faced Alaric, who was currently in the middle of observing his status panel. Only a few months had passed since His Highness became an elite knight, and he had already made another breakthrough. Meanwhile, I'm still stuck at the peak of the elite knight realm, sighed Fredrin, who was among the gathered crowd. It wasn't just him. Many of the warriors were lamenting their inferior talent. Compared to Alaric, their speed of advancement was rubbish. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of Alaric with a whoosh. You! So you were talking about yourself yesterday. Lucas stared at his son with a dumbfounded look. Hearing his father's voice, Alaric closed the cyan screen and smiled at him. Seeing his son's smug expression, Lucas could only shake his head. He thought that he was the most talented in Estania, but it seemed like his son's talent and potential were double his own. However, he didn't feel jealous about this. Instead, he felt immense pride and elation. You have made me proud, son. Congratulations on your advancement. Lucas tapped his son's shoulder with unconcealed joy. Congratulations on your advancement, Your Highness. The warriors also congratulated him. Their loud, sonorous voice almost awakened everyone in the estate. Soon, more people arrived to congratulate him, including his two mothers and his wife. Alaric thanked everyone one by one. When are you planning to depart? Lucas suddenly asked. Hearing this, everyone turned to Alaric. They had already been made aware of the advancing Harun troops. Alaric's expression became serious as he responded. We will leave today. Everyone was stunned, not expecting him to leave so soon. Are you not going to celebrate your advancement? Maria asked with concern. Alaric shook his head. I cannot celebrate knowing that the western borders of our nation will be attacked soon. Please forgive me, Mom. Maria sighed at his response. Do you want to borrow my troops? Jade stared at her son. Alaric shook his head. I have more than enough people for this trip. The estate also needs someone to defend it, so it will be better for them to stay here. Chapter 332. Heading to the western borders. In the next 2 hours, Alaric prepared for his trip to the western borders. Concerned for his well-being, Hershey and Elena helped him arrange his luggage. His two mothers also handed him all sorts of snacks so that he wouldn't be hungry on the trip. After making his preparations, Alaric stepped out of the mansion with his family. You must be careful out there, son. You are no longer just the heir of House Silversword. You also carry the bloodline of the imperial family. Lucas reminded him with a stern look. Listening to his words, Alaric smiled faintly. I know, Dad. I can take care of my own. 5 Transcendents will follow me on this trip. Not to mention that I will also bring that guy. Hearing his last sentence, Lucas thought about the massive beast that only knew how to laze around behind the mansion. With a catastrophe-grade monster at his side, I don't need to worry about him. He smiled wryly while shaking his head. Upon leaving the mansion, Alaric saw that the troops were already waiting for him beside their mounts. Seeing this, Alaric turned his head to his family and bid them farewell for the last time. Be careful, Alaric. Hershey stared deeply at her husband, her eyes brimming with tears. I will. He took her in his arms and kissed her forehead. You should stay within the town while I am away. Never leave without informing my father. He whispered. Amen. Hershey hummed in response while burying her head in his chest. Do not forget to send us letters while you are there. If you miss even a day, I will send my troops to the west to look for you. Jade warned Alaric, which made the latter chuckle in amusement. Yes, Mom. I will write you letters every day. Smiling lightly, he replied with a nod of his head. He then moved his gaze to Maria. Her belly had grown considerably larger and she was getting closer to her due date. If it weren't for the mission, Alaric would have stayed in the estate to wait for his little sister's birth. He couldn't afford to make the same mistakes in his last missions. He would feel more assured to complete the mission without accidents with him present. Mom, you should take care of your body. Don't overwork yourself and never forget to eat those elixirs. He gently reminded her. Maria nodded with a smile. Don't worry about me, son. By the time you return, you will see your little sister. Alaric exchanged a few more words with his family before he turned around. Looking at the unmoving troops standing before him, Alaric made a whistling sound akin to a bird's cry. Witwiyu. In the next moment, a large shadow cast over them, followed by a loud, ear-piercing roar of a beast. Roar! Everyone looked up and saw a winged beast that was as big as an adult elephant. Whoosh! The creature dove to the ground and landed with a swoosh. With the exception of Lucas, everyone else felt their hearts tightening when the creature swept its beastly gaze upon them. They were already familiar with this beast since they had seen it behind the main mansion on multiple occasions. However, despite their familiarity with it, they didn't dare get closer to the creature, afraid that it would smite them with its blade-like claws. Zephyr, you must accompany me for this trip. Alaric stroked the beast's fur. To everyone's surprise, the terrifying beast lowered its head in delight and even emitted a purring sound. This made them admire Alaric even more. They believed that only someone as gifted as he could tame a dangerous monster like the draconic lion. Mount your horses, Alaric shouted to the warriors. Hearing his command, everyone immediately jumped onto their horses in synchronized motion. Alaric also jumped on Zephyr's back. Once we reach the western borders, I will give you the armor I had specially ordered for you, he whispered to the beast. As if understanding his words, Zephyr made a joyous growl. Alaric chuckled and rubbed the beast's thick fur. He then took one last look at his family and waved his hand at them before he commanded his troops to depart. In the western region, there was a fortress city called Iron Sand Fort. It was on the most outer edge of the western region, so it was usually the first one to get attacked during battles. With the constant battles they faced, this forged a tenacious force known as the Iron Sand Army, which was led by a famous general who was ranked third in the Estanian Dragon leaderboard. With the presence of this fierce general and his powerful army, Iron Sand Fort was able to stand firmly on the front line. However, at this moment, the formidable Iron Sand Army returned to the fortress city with numerous casualties. Marquis Marco Harold looked at his bedraggled troops with a face filled with sorrow. Of the 10,000 warriors he commanded, only 4,000 managed to return. The third outpost has already been destroyed. In a few days, the enemies will attack this fortress. Can I defend this place? His eyes flashed with a gloomy light. He received a message from the capital saying that their reinforcements would arrive in 5 days, but he was uncertain if he could protect the fortress before they arrived. Suddenly, a messenger on horseback rushed towards him with an excited look. My lord, there is news from the northern garrison. Hearing this, Marco Harold turned his head and furrowed his eyebrows. Speak, he uttered. He wasn't feeling good since he had lost many good warriors. The messenger could sense his annoyance, so he quickly reported. His Highness Giovanni has arrived with his troops. What? Marco was pleasantly surprised. Although the second prince was known for being unruly, he was also famous for his strength. He was a transcendent knight who commanded a faction filled with numerous experts. Marco grabbed the messenger, almost yanking the man off his horse, and asked, Where is he? Chapter 333. The second prince arrives. Giovanni had just arrived in Iron Sand Fort, and the first thing he noticed was the impoverished conditions of the fortress. He revealed a look of disgust when he saw a group of residents wearing dirty, coarse linen clothes. That old bastard Dominic actually sent me here as punishment. Damn it! Thinking about the old man, he spat out furiously. Because of the Crimson Tower fiasco a few months ago, he had received punishment and was even asked to compensate the families of those affected by the incident. With his strongest backer gone, He could only swallow his anger and accept his punishment with gritted teeth. As if that wasn't enough, Dominic showed up at his doorstep and told him to help in defending Iron Sand Fort against the invaders. Of course, Giovanni didn't want to accept this troublesome task, so he rejected Dominic's request. However, the old man suddenly beat him up and told him that his identity as the second heir to the throne would be taken from him if he refused. Badly beaten and left with no choice, Prince Giovanni could only reluctantly comply. That was what led him to this place. While he was cursing Dominic in his mind, he suddenly felt a strong aura quickly approaching them. He narrowed his eyes and looked in a certain direction.
Marco.
He immediately recognized the other party. Marquis Marco Harold was famous throughout the empire, and he was known as the Western Sword Marquis due to his high proficiency in swordsmanship. Soon, a middle-aged man on horseback whose armor was painted with dried-up blood appeared before him. Looking at his blood-stained armor and his grimy face, the second prince could already tell that he had gone through a tough battle. "You look like hammered shit, Sir Marco," Prince Giovanni remarked with a chuckle. Marco frowned at his words, but he was in no mood to quarrel with him. He looked behind the prince and asked, "Your Highness, how many soldiers did you bring with you?" Giovanni was pissed. This guy hadn't even greeted him yet, and he was already asking how many soldiers he brought. "Look here, Sir Marco. I know that your situation isn't looking good, but how dare you take this prince lightly? Do I look like a pushover to you?" He thought that the other party was looking down on him, a huge misunderstanding on his part. Marco, who was already in a bad mood, almost snapped. He took a deep breath to calm his brewing rage. He still needed the second prince's support to defend Iron Sand Fort, so he could only lower his head. He cupped his fists and greeted the second prince in a cold voice. "I apologize for my rudeness, Your Highness. The situation is urgent, so Enough! I am in no mood to hear your excuse. Have you prepared my accommodation?" Prince Giovanni rubbed his temples, his face revealing unconcealed displeasure. Marco stared deeply at the spoiled prince. He had the sudden urge to punch the latter's face, but he held himself back for the greater picture. "Yes, Your Highness, we have prepared an estate for you and your men," Marco responded, veins protruding on his face. "Lead the way," Giovanni said in a commanding tone. Marco gripped the reins tightly as he nodded with a dark look. "Yes, Your Highness. This bastard only brought 2,000 soldiers with him. This wouldn't be enough to defend the fortress." He looked at the prince's arrogant mug and asked, "Your Highness, if I may ask, are there more reinforcements coming?" Hearing this, Giovanni sent him a deep look and replied, "Sir Andre will be here in 5 days with 8,000 soldiers." Marco fell silent. Andre Thompson was ranked lower than him in the Estanian Dragon leaderboard, but the man was also a formidable character. Knowing that he had brought 8,000 soldiers to reinforce them made him feel a bit better. He no longer spoke to the second prince after that inquiry. Half an hour later, they arrived at the entrance of a small estate which had been prepared for the reinforcement troops. "You call this an estate?" Giovanni expressed his dissatisfaction when he saw the old mansion at a distance. Marco ignored his words and told the guards to open the gates. He then gestured for the prince to enter. "Your Highness, please follow me. I have something to discuss with you regarding the situation on the front lines." The atmosphere was tense, and it looked like the two would fight at any second. Luckily, nothing happened other than the second prince throwing a few shades at the Marquis. "This spoiled piece of shit. If I didn't have the need for your troops, I would have cut off your head right at this instant." Marco cursed in his heart while leading the prince to the main mansion. Soon they entered the old building. He then brought the second prince and his confidants to the meeting hall. "Make it quick. I want to get some rest." Giovanni waved his hand impatiently. Marco could barely control his fury, and it was a miracle that nothing happened until now. With a gloomy expression, he recounted his experiences on the front line. At first, the second prince didn't seem to be interested, but his face quickly changed when he heard Marco's report. "You mean the enemy has 20,000 soldiers?" Giovanni asked, his expression looking unsightly to behold. He had come here in a hurry in hopes of completing his task soon, but Marco's information made him feel like he had been fooled by Dominic. That old bastard didn't even tell me this. For God's sake. He was frustrated, and it was apparent on his face. That is just the estimated number, Your Highness. There could be more of them, but we are not certain for now. Marco had been fighting with the troops from Harun for a week now. He had this feeling that they had more troops hidden away. However, he still hadn't confirmed this since all the scouts he sent had been killed. Chapter 334. Harun attacks. Marco left the estate after he informed the second prince about the situation. My lord, how was your discussion with His Highness? Will he help us defend the fortress? Asked one of his subordinates who was waiting outside. The rest looked at the Marquis, hoping to hear the good news from him. To their dismay, Marco shook his head with a grave look. His Highness has 2,000 warriors, but he didn't promise me anything, so we should not place our hopes in him. What should we do then? At this rate, those bastards from Harun will be here in 2 or 3 days. Should we evacuate the civilians and take refuge in Windy Valley? Everyone revealed anxious faces as they discussed amongst themselves. The situation was dire and the enemies could attack them at any moment. Marco listened to his subordinate's suggestions with a somber mood. He had been protecting Iron Sand Fort for many years, so he was reluctant to abandon the fortress city. He had grown attached to the place, for it held precious memories. How could I even think of abandoning this city? Suddenly, his eyes flashed with strong determination. Many of my subordinates died to defend this place. I wouldn't be able to face them in the underworld if I choose to leave. Silence, he muttered, his transcendent aura leaking out like an erupting volcano. Everyone was scared stiff when they sensed the sudden eruption of his aura. Looking at his subordinates, Marco muttered in a cold voice, "We will defend the fortress even if it means death." Hearing this, everyone was stunned. They were infected by his glorious spirit. "We will follow your commands, Lord Marquis. We are not afraid of death, my lord." Marco felt proud in his heart. These were the people he had nurtured for decades. "Good. Inform everyone to make preparations," he barked out. "Yes, my lord." Your subordinate obeys. 2 days later, Marco stood atop the walls, observing the approaching army with a deep frown. With his keen eyes, he estimated that there were over 20,000 warriors on the opposing side. Furthermore, he could also sense numerous powerful auras which weren't any weaker than his own. Once the enemies reach our range, fire the artillery at once. Archers, wait for my signal and keep your eyes peeled. Support unit. He issued a series of commands. Their army is mostly composed of cavalrymen and about a fourth of them are infantry. They also have a small unit of beast soul warriors. Marco clenched his fists when he saw the formidable formation of Harun. He only had 4,000 soldiers left. Including the fortress's army, they had about 10,000 warriors. However, most of these soldiers were just ordinary men. Some were even young teens who had been conscripted due to the urgency of the situation. Thinking about the huge difference in their power, Marco's heart sank. There was no movement on the enemy side for the next 3 hours, but something changed when the 4-hour mark came. The beast soul warriors of Harun stepped forward and chanted spells. Seeing this, Marco furrowed his eyebrows. What are they doing? He couldn't understand their plan, but when the beast soul warriors released their spells, he found out that those beast soul warriors actually had long-range spells that could decimate their sturdy walls. Activate the wall's defensive abilities at once. As one of the key fortress cities in the west, Iron Sand Fort's walls were engraved with strong defensive abilities. Regular artillery wouldn't be able to penetrate its defenses. However, the heavy bombardment of the beast soul warriors caused cracks to form on their seemingly impenetrable defenses. "Prepare for impact," Marco shouted, urging everyone to take cover when he noticed that their defenses were about to collapse. Rumble. Boom. A small part of the mana shield collapsed before everything fell apart and turned into motes of light. After the mana shield collapsed, the walls of Iron Sand Fort were left bare. The heavy bombardment from the Beast Soul warriors didn't cease, and their powerful spells struck the walls of the fortress, causing massive damage and destruction. Some unlucky warriors on top of the walls were blasted into smithereens. A few caught fire and burned to death, while others were flattened by falling large debris. To prevent further destruction, Marco instructed the artillery crews to focus their offensive on the Beast Soul warriors. Soon, large burning rocks were hurled into the enemy formation, looking like meteorites about to fall onto the surface. Bang! Bang! As if expecting their retaliation, a defensive artifact was activated, protecting all the Beast Soul warriors from the burning rocks. With most of their attention focused on the Beast Soul warriors, the enemy commander took the chance to command a portion of their infantry to charge, bringing with them their siege weapons. The warriors of Iron Sand Fort panicked when they saw how prepared Harun was. Only Marco's subordinates managed to remain calm. "Do not falter. Our reinforcements will come soon. We just need to hold them off for 2 days," Marco shouted to the troops, hoping to ignite their wavering fighting spirit. Unfortunately, most of the warriors were greenhorns, so they were unable to shake off their trepidation. Some of them were even shaking, barely able to hold their weapons. Seeing this, Marco's face fell. He thought that they would somehow be able to defend the city for a day, but from the looks of it, Iron Sand Fort would likely collapse in just half a day. Should I send out my elite troops to buy us some time? He gritted his teeth as he organized his thoughts. The enemy infantry was approaching the walls with their siege weapons. If the enemies rushed in, Iron Sand Fort would quickly collapse. Just as he was about to send his elite troops, he suddenly sensed movement behind him. He frowned and turned his head. To his elation, the second prince had come with his soldiers. "He is here." The second prince's troops were mostly composed of elites. Their presence could turn this battle around. Chapter 335. Destroying the enemy infantry. Giovanni wasn't in a great mood. He was sent to Iron Sand Fort to defend the western borders against more than 20,000 enemies. He could have chosen to escape with his men, but doing so would only earn him the disdain of the whole empire. He still wanted to be crowned as the next emperor, so he didn't want to damage his reputation. "Your Highness!" Marco jumped down from the wall to greet him. Giovanni glanced at him and asked, "What is the situation?" Marco couldn't afford to waste any time, so he quickly updated him on the situation. Hearing his report, the second prince was surprisingly cooperative. "I give you full command of my men, but we must defend this place until Andre arrives." Marco was taken aback, not expecting him to relinquish control over his own troops. He was in urgent need of elite warriors, so he immediately agreed with a nod. "You have my word, Your Highness. This fortress will not fall." "Good. You may go. I can take care of my own." Giovanni waved his hand, indicating for him to leave. Protecting him were 4 transcendent knights. One of them was a former member of the Dragon Guards, a warrior who was about to reach the peak of transcendent. With these experts around him, Marco didn't have to worry about his safety. He didn't linger for long and left after assigning tasks to the second prince's troops. "Your Highness, you shouldn't be here. Marco can defend this wall by himself," urged one of the 4 transcendents to the second prince. Giovanni sent the man a cold look and replied with a gloomy tone, "Are you telling me to escape?" Sensing the prince's displeasure, the man shook his head. "No, Your Highness. I just don't want you to face unnecessary risks." Giovanni snorted. "Say no more. I will stay here and help them defend the walls." He disliked being here, and he didn't want to do something so annoyingly dangerous. However, he didn't want another nation to claim a part of their lands. "This is my land. No one can take it from me." With a cold look, he jumped on top of the wall with a whoosh. The 4 transcendents immediately followed him. When he saw the situation beyond the wall, he realized that Marco was just being optimistic. "Can we really defend this place?" Giovanni furrowed his eyebrows. Bang! At this moment, a fire spell suddenly struck the area behind them. When he turned his head, he saw that a large portion of the walls had been blasted, leaving charred bodies and debris scattered around. "Be careful, Your Highness. There is a unit of beast soul warriors bombarding the walls with their spells, warned one of the transcendent guards. Giovanni wasn't new to seeing dead bodies, but the death of the Empire's soldiers pissed him off. How dare those bastards kill my people? He muttered with rage. Where is Marco? We must kill those beast soul warriors immediately, he shouted while glaring at the enemies in the distance. Your Highness, I think Lord Marco is planning to attack the enemy infantry with your troops. Hearing this, Giovanni frowned. From above, he could see the enemy infantry approaching the walls with their siege weapons. Even an idiot like him knew that it would be their end once the enemies managed to climb over the walls. How can he stop the enemy infantry with only 2,000 warriors? With one look, he could roughly guess that there were over 5,000 enemy infantry. Furthermore, their beast soul warriors were also providing cover fire for them, allowing them to charge almost unhindered. Follow me. We can't just sit idly by, Giovanni muttered as he went to join Marco and the cavalry unit. The four Transcendents persuaded the second prince not to be reckless, but he stubbornly rejected their pleas. In the end, they could only stick with him. Marco didn't sense that they had joined the formation since he was focused on observing the enemy's position. In the next moment, he shouted a series of commands. Lift the gate. Cavalry, prepare to charge with me. He unsheathed his sword and waited for the gate to be lifted with an ice-cold gaze. As soon as the gate was lifted, he squeezed his legs, urging his horse to charge. Charge! The cavalrymen followed him, their loud battle cries echoing in all directions. Looking at the awe-inspiring Marco, Giovanni felt a trace of admiration. No wonder he is called the Western Sword Marquis. The enemy infantry didn't expect them to send a cavalry unit which caught them by surprise. With Marco leading the charge, they carved out a path and penetrated the enemy's infantry unit. They were like a sharp sword that stabbed deeply into the enemy formation. Harun's infantry commander immediately reacted. He commanded his men to change their formation to stop Marco's cavalry unit from causing more damage to his troops. A fearsome battle followed. Hundreds of corpses soon littered the ground, slowly piling up to form a mound. Marco displayed his tyrannical power, slicing down dozens of enemies with each strike of his sword. He was an unstoppable force. With his valiant leadership, the cavalry unit's morale soared. In the next half an hour, more than half of the 5,000 enemy infantry fell, causing the collapse of their formation. The Beast Soul warriors tried to help them, but for fear of friendly fire, the help they could offer was limited. Left with no choice, the enemy commander sent their cavalry to support their infantry unit. It was a force consisting of 10,000 riders. Seeing their movements, Marco decisively ordered a retreat. Fall back. Return to the fortress, he shouted. Upon hearing his command, the cavalry unit quickly turned around and rushed back to the fortress, leaving the enemy infantry in a sorry state. Marco took a glance at his dead comrades, his expression becoming grim. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. I pray that Aru will accept your souls into his divine kingdom. Chapter 336. Derek, the former dragon guard. Upon entering the fortress, Marco immediately signaled the gate operator to lower the gate. He then looked at the second prince, who was recovering his mana by eating what seemed to be an elixir. During the battle against the enemy infantry, Marco sensed the second prince's presence. At least he is not a coward, he thought to himself before he pulled his eyes away. The battle was far from over and his job wasn't done. After taking 1 minute of rest, Marco headed back to the top of the walls to take command. Focus our artillery on their cavalry. Don't let them get close to the gate, he shouted while keeping his eyes on the approaching enemy cavalry. He could sense a powerful aura from the person leading them, one that was at least comparable to his own. Such an expert could destroy their gate with ease if he were allowed to get close. He was yet to fully recover his mana, so engaging with him would be too dangerous. He could only hope that their artillery could somehow slow down their advance. Boom! Boom! Loud explosions rocked the fortress as another barrage of attacks was sent by the enemy's Beast Soul warriors. Without the mana shield protecting them, The walls received heavy damage and one side even collapsed, which left everyone vulnerable to enemy forces. Seeing this, Marco swiftly gave instructions to the troops to stabilize the situation. They fought relentlessly, giving all their energy into defending the crumbling walls. With their efforts, they managed to survive the first day of the siege. Looking at the retreating enemy forces, Marco leaned against the broken wall and let out an exhausted sigh. "We survived," he mumbled, his face covered in thick beads of sweat. Although they had successfully survived the siege, no one cheered. Everyone looked out of breath and some even collapsed on the ground. Seeing his troops' condition, Marco's eyes flashed with concern. Can we survive tomorrow's siege? They had more than 10,000 warriors when the battle began, but now only 8,000 remained, of which over 1,000 had injuries of varying severity. At this moment, Marco stood atop what remained of the walls, gazing at the distant camp with a cold gaze. "My lord, you should get some rest." An unfamiliar voice drifted into his ears. Hearing this, Marco frowned and turned around. Behind him was a middle-aged man with a pair of swords on his back. His arms were riddled with scars, and there was even a gnarly scar on his forehead which looked like it had been cut by an axe. Marco had seen this man follow the second prince around. Frowning, he asked, "I am sorry, but I don't recognize you, sir. Can you tell me your name?" The middle-aged man chuckled. He took a swig from the wine gourd in his hand before he replied, "It's not surprising that you don't recognize me. You can call me Derek. I'm once part of the Dragon Guards." When he mentioned this, Marco's face visibly changed. "But I now work for His Highness." Derek continued with a shake of his head. "I think this is something that you shouldn't casually tell anyone, sir," Marco remarked with a stern voice. Derek guffawed when he heard his words. "My lord, Marco, we are going to die anyway, so it doesn't matter. Even if we somehow survive, I know you will keep it a secret for me." Marco was stunned by his response. With a complicated expression, he let out a heavy sigh. "You are right. Pass me the gourd." Hearing this, Derek grinned and tossed the wine gourd to the Marquis. "I got it from the capital. Quite a strong flavor, I would say." Marco didn't say anything and took large gulps of the wine. "Feel better?" Derek chuckled as he stood next to the Marquis. "Thanks." Marco nodded and passed the wine gourd back to him, but Derek shook his head. "You can keep it. This could be your last chance to drink such fine wine." "So you are dropping honorifics now?" Marco said before taking a swig from the wine gourd. "Come on, you still care about that?" Derek raised an eyebrow and stared at him with an exaggerated expression. Seeing this, Marco didn't bother to correct him and just silently drank the wine. The two became silent after that, and it was Marco who broke the silence a few minutes later. "Why did you stay by His Highness' side? With your strength, you could have chosen a better lord to follow." Derek was taken aback. "You could be executed if someone from the palace heard your words. Who cares about that? We are both going to die anyway." Marco spoke in the same tone he used earlier. Derek shook his head and responded in a calm voice. "Not everyone gets to choose the life they want to live." Marco could sense the subtle change in his expression, so he no longer continued with the subject. "Marco, I once admired you. You were the reason I took up the sword, so you better not die in front of my eyes." Derek stared deeply at him. Marco snorted and replied, "I am the Western Sword Marquis. I will not die here." Derek smiled faintly. He lifted his head and looked up at the night sky. "Aru, please protect us." The soldiers of Iron Sand Fort weren't able to rest well, and they were awoken by the sudden trembling of the ground. "Enemy cavalry incoming!" Marco's shout echoed across the fortress, forcing everyone to stand up and prepare for battle. Tired and deprived of sleep, the warriors moved sluggishly. Marco noticed this from above the wall, but there was nothing he could do. They were at war, so there was no time to rest. "Assemble the cavalrymen. We will engage with the enemies." He issued a command, his eyes filled with strong determination to live. "Let's try to survive again today," he whispered to himself before he jumped onto his horse. Chapter 337. Marco's strong willpower. Marco took Iron Sand Fort's remaining cavalry riders to engage with the enemy's cavalrymen. They were outnumbered by more than twice, but no one hesitated to follow his charge. Kill! Kill! Their fearsome roars echoed across the land, surprising the enemy cavalry with their momentum. In the next moment, a gruesome clash followed. Horses and warriors were torn apart as the two sides fought with ferocious intensity. At this moment, Marco finally found the enemy cavalry commander whose aura was no weaker than his own. The two faced off, glaring at each other with murderous intent. Suddenly, they moved almost at the same time, charging towards the other with unstoppable force. Marco swung his sword, a relic he had gotten from the imperial family as a gift. Upon imbuing it with mana, a terrifying power surged forth, threatening to destroy everything in its path. Sensing this oppressive power, the enemy cavalry commander immediately maneuvered his mount and lifted his shield in preparation for the attack. He had no time to dodge it, so he could only try to block it with his relic-level shield. Bang! A violent shockwave erupted, which caused an earth-shaking explosion. The enemy cavalry commander grunted from the impact, but he managed to defend himself without being harmed. His shield gleamed with earthly glow as he imbued it with mana to activate its defensive power. The two transcendents fought fiercely, causing shockwaves and chaos with every collision. They appeared to be evenly matched, but Marco hadn't fully recovered from yesterday's exhausting battle. This guy is tougher than I thought. Thick beads of sweat rolled down his face as he stared at his opponent. He didn't know the other party's name, but he knew for sure that this warrior was the strongest man he had ever fought. You look tired. Why don't you give up? Maybe I will consider sparing your life. The man spoke, his voice laced with sarcasm. Marco ignored his taunting remarks and urged his horse to pounce at him. Whoosh! Seeing this, the enemy cavalry commander sneered. Struggle all you want. In the end, the results will be the same. Clang! Clang! The two exchanged 100 moves in a few seconds, creating sparks with every clash of their weapons. As the battle dragged on, Marco slowly found himself exhausted. His arms were starting to get heavy the more he swung his sword. In that instant, he realized that he could no longer prolong the fight. With a fearsome glint in his eyes, Marco unleashed a huge portion of his remaining mana for one big move. I have been trying to master this sword technique for many years, but until now, I still haven't mastered it. Although the sword technique he was about to release wasn't complete, it was his strongest move. An overwhelming energy gathered in his sword, causing the air to twist and turn. Marco's arms bulged as he swung his sword with all his might. Whoosh! He could feel a slight pain in his chest, a sign that he had overexerted himself. However, he ignored the pain and unleashed the lethal blow. The enemy cavalry commander paled in fright upon sensing the power behind his sword. He quickly gathered his mana and guided it to his shield to increase its defensive abilities to the limit. With a grunt, he readied for the impact. Boom! Marco's sword struck his shield. The force behind the sword made his horse cry out in pain before collapsing. The enemy cavalry commander was flung away by the violent power. He could feel his insides screaming with pain. Although he survived, his relic-level shield has been destroyed and his left arm was broken. He landed awkwardly on the ground and looked at the mighty swordsman before him. You are strong, but that attack must have taken most of your mana, he muttered while wiping off the blood at the corner of his lips. He could sense that Marco's aura was unstable, which was most likely caused by drawing out most of his mana to deliver that sword technique. It's my turn, he said as he imbued mana into his weapon, another relic-level equipment. Subsequently, he rushed out and pounced upon Marco, brandishing his weapon with overwhelming might. In the face of his attack, Marco smiled faintly. I am Marco Harold, the Western Sword Marquis. Remember that name, for that is the name of your vanquisher. With a heroic spirit, he urged his weary horse to charge, intending to meet the enemy's attack head-on. Boom! A large crater was formed as soon as they collided. Both warriors erupted with intense power, their oppressive aura preventing anyone from coming close. Damn it! How is he still fighting with this much power when his mana has almost run out? The enemy cavalry commander was stunned by Marco's unwavering aggression. It felt like he was fighting against an immovable wall. On the other hand, Marco's horse had long since perished after being stabbed by his opponent. He walked unsteadily, his breathing labored. He had reached his limits, and it was only because of his strong willpower that he was able to remain standing. Looking at his bedraggled enemy, Marco smiled coldly. I have made a promise. I will not die here. He slowly walked towards his opponent while tightly holding his sword with both hands. His movements were shaky, but the enemy cavalry commander felt an unprecedented feeling of panic. How is he still moving in that condition? He subconsciously flinched. As arrogant as he was, he feared death. Are you afraid of me? A mocking voice drifted into his ears, making him feel furious and humiliated. Stop deluding yourself. You can't even properly hold your sword anymore, he shouted to mask his fear. Hearing his words, Marco paused his steps and muttered in a cold voice. To achieve my goal of reaching the apex of swordsmanship, I trained a body that has overcome its mortal potential. Today, I will show you the results of those painful training. Chapter 338. Cruelty of War. Marco suddenly pounced towards his opponent. His figure blurred and reappeared almost instantaneously in front of the other. Whoosh! With a swing, his sword caused a sharp keening sound as if the air was torn apart. Caught unprepared by his unexpected burst of speed, the enemy cavalry commander was late to react. No! He managed to lift his arms halfway, but Marco's sword was faster. KHSHHKK. A warrior at the peak of Transcendent died. His body split in half with a slash of a sword. Marco stared at the dead warrior, using his sword as a crutch to prop himself up, and whispered, "You have fought well." He then lifted his head and observed the situation. His troops were still fighting tooth and nail with the enemy cavalry. Despite being outnumbered by more than twice, they somehow managed to defend their positions, preventing the enemy troops from advancing further. However, Marco could see that his soldiers were already beyond exhausted. It was a miracle that they managed to hold on until now. He jumped onto an ownerless horse and shouted, "Warriors of Estania, retreat to the fortress." Hearing his loud roar, the soldiers didn't hesitate. They abandoned their opponents and retreated without looking back. The enemy cavalry tried to pursue them, but the archers on top of the fortress fired their arrows upon them to cover their comrades' retreat. I managed to stay alive, thought Marco as he jumped off his new horse. In this battle, he had expended almost every ounce of mana in his body, leaving him feeling incredibly weak. You survived! A familiar voice drifted into his ears. He turned around and saw Derek on horseback, approaching him with a broad grin. His armor was drenched in blood, and he also had new wounds all over his body. There was even a new cut on his face that exposed his bones underneath. While trying his best to stand on his feet, Marco responded with a faint smile. You look hideous. I almost didn't recognize you. Derek chuckled and shook his head. You look even worse. Marco looked around, searching for someone. What about His Highness? Where is he? He saw the second prince joining them in battle, but he lost sight of him when he fought with the enemy cavalry commander. Derek pointed with his finger and replied, He is fine. He got a few cuts, but nothing life-threatening. The healers should be able to heal him. You don't look very worried about him. Marco raised an eyebrow. You misunderstand me. His Highness will never die as long as I live. Besides, there are 3 more transcendents by his side. If they want to kill him, they would have to go through the 4 of us first. Derek shrugged. Marco didn't bother to argue with him and left after excusing himself. The enemies were still engaging with the troops, so he had to check the situation and make sure that things were under control. While he was observing the battle, an injured warrior came up to him and reported in a grim voice, My lord, Sir Vitali has fallen. Hearing this, Marco was stunned. His eyes flashed with disbelief. Vitali was a transcendent knight who was ranked 83rd in the Estanian Dragon leaderboard. He was one of the most prominent warriors in Iron Sand Fort and also one of his direct subordinates. His death was a huge blow to the fortress city, but Marco couldn't wallow in sadness. He had to remain calm in front of his subordinates to keep them composed. "Were you able to retrieve his corpse?" he asked while feigning indifference. The injured warrior lowered his head and replied in a sorrowful voice, "Yes, my lord, but his body isn't intact. We only managed to take back his upper torso." The warrior suddenly kneeled and muttered, his voice choking up, "Your subordinate is incompetent. I failed to protect Sir Vitali's body." Marco's shoulders trembled upon hearing this. "Stand up. It's not your fault. The blame is on me." Marco grabbed the injured warrior and helped him stand up. "My lord, where is Sir Vitali's body?" Marco asked. The warrior pointed at one of the hundreds of corpses beneath the wall. With his keen vision, Marco quickly spotted the familiar face among the corpses. "My friend, you have fought well. Leave everything to me." He clenched his fists and pulled his eyes away. When the sun was about to set, the enemies finally retreated. Mountains of corpses were scattered all around the battlefield, filling the air with the strong stench of blood. Looking at the bodies outside the fortress, Marco was filled with profound grief. A moment later, another warrior approached him to give his report. "My lord, the enemy has retreated and all our warriors have. 4,567 of our soldiers were pronounced dead. Another issue is the corpses outside. If nothing is to be done, it might cause an epidemic. What should we do, my lord?" Marco took a deep breath to gather his thoughts. Each information was difficult to take in. After a moment of silence, he responded with a gloomy face, "Burn the corpses." The warrior was so shocked by his instructions that he was unable to speak for a few seconds. "But our comrades?" Marco raised his hand and shook his head. "We don't have the time and energy to retrieve our comrades' remains. Our enemies might also take the chance to attack us if we try to take back the corpses." He knew that it was a difficult decision to make, but there was nothing he could do. "Just do as I say." The warrior lowered his head to acknowledge the command. "Your subordinate obeys." Marco coldly watched as his subordinates poured oil onto the corpses. In the next moment, the corpses were lit ablaze, creating a massive fire that engulfed the remains of the warriors. "Rest in peace, my brothers." Marco felt emotional as he watched the corpses burn. Chapter 339, Night Raid. Iron Sand Fort lost more than half of their soldiers on the second day of the battle. Most of their casualties were cavalrymen, followed by the foot soldiers. Now, they were only left with a little less than 4,000 warriors. With their current numbers, stopping the advance of Harun's army was impossible. Their only hope was for more reinforcements to arrive. However, they might have to wait for 2 more days before help would arrive. Given their current situation, it was impossible to hold on for another day. Marco wanted to get some sleep that night after the second battle, but negative thoughts kept him awake. He hadn't slept for a few days now, so his body wasn't recovering well. "I only recovered a fifth of my mana. By tomorrow, I might not be able to recover half." His face darkened as he thought of this. His strength was needed for tomorrow's battle, but he wasn't in his best condition. Unable to sleep, he stepped out of his tent and decided to get some air. The pungent scent of blood still lingered in the air, but he had already gotten used to it. A few meters away, he saw his troops resting in turns. Those who were on night duty had dark circles under their eyes, clearly exhausted and deprived of sleep. He felt pity for them, but they couldn't leave the fortress unguarded. While he was inspecting his soldiers' condition, he suddenly sensed something unusual. "HM?" He hurriedly jumped on top of the broken wall and stared in a certain direction with narrowed eyes. With his keen perception, he noticed a weird energy blocking his senses. "They are planning a night raid." Realizing the enemy's intentions, his face fell. He then took a deep breath and shouted to awaken his troops. "Enemy attack! Assemble immediately!" Upon hearing his words, everyone was forced to wake up. They quickly assembled beneath the walls and waited for his instructions. Looking at the weary soldiers beneath the wall, Marco didn't know if they could survive the night raid. Despite his doubt, he didn't show any emotion outwardly. Warriors of Iron Sand Fort, tonight might be our last battle. We have been tasked to defend this fortress regardless of the costs. Do not be afraid. Your families have already been sent to a safe place. However, our mission isn't over. We will defend this place and stop the enemy from advancing. We will never retreat, he shouted, his voice filled with determination. We will never retreat. We will follow you into battle, my lord. We will defend this place. The warriors' cries echoed in all directions. Hearing this, Marco took a deep breath and shouted, "To your positions! Move out!" As soon as he gave the command, everyone rushed to their respective positions. The archers jumped on top of the walls and readied their equipment. Meanwhile, the cavalrymen and infantrymen assembled before the gate, waiting for further instructions. At this moment, Giovanni had already mounted his horse, his face looking grim. In the battle earlier, he had received some injuries and his mana was also nearly depleted. He hadn't even fully recovered, but another battle was about to begin. He could have chosen to retreat, but he felt a sense of duty to defend his land. He didn't know how he got this sudden sense of responsibility, but it happened. Even until now, he still couldn't believe that he chose to stay. I am foolish. I should have retreated, but it is already too late for that. He thought to himself when he saw an exhausted Marco mounting his horse at the very forefront of the formation. Seeing this, he turned his head to Derek and called out to him. "Hey! Yes, your highness?" Derek stared at him with an eyebrow raised upwards. "When the battle starts, keep an eye on Marco," the second prince instructed indifferently. Derek was surprised by his command, but after a moment of confusion, he nodded. "Your subordinate understands." Giovanni no longer said anything. He unsheathed his sword and waited for Marco's signal. Meanwhile, Derek was currently looking at the second prince with a baffled gaze. This arrogant heir to the throne had never shown respect or care towards anyone, but something was different this time. He could feel that the second prince was evolving, not physically but emotionally. Suddenly, an earth-shaking roar drifted into his ears. "Warriors of Estania, prepare to charge with me as soon as the gate is lifted." Derek watched the Marquis broad back with a faint smile. "Look at you acting so tough." He knew that the Marquis was the most exhausted out of everyone in the fortress, but he never heard the man complain even once. It was because of his presence that these tired soldiers were able to get up and lift their weapons. Without him, Iron Sand Fort would have long since fallen. A loud click echoed, a sign that the gate had been fully lifted. In the next moment, Marco's voice resounded across the fortress. "Follow me into battle. Kill as many enemies as you can. Crush them." Everyone roared at the top of their lungs, answering his call. The enemies who were trying to sneak around were stunned when they heard their earth-shaking battle cries. "We have been discovered. It doesn't matter. They are already exhausted. Kill them all and occupy the fortress." Knowing that a surprise attack was already impossible, the soldiers of Harun decided to confront them head-on. They believed that they could easily defeat their tired enemies, but upon the collision of their armies, they realized that the warriors of Iron Sand Fort seemed to be in frenzied state. They fought violently. Their high aggression caught Harun's troops by surprise. With the initial clash, Harun's troops were temporarily pushed back. They felt as if they were fighting a group of crazy hyenas. They were relentless, brutal, and unafraid of death. Fear spread among the soldiers of Harun and some even thought of retreating. However, their commander revealed himself, his presence dissipating everyone's worries. "Don't falter. The enemies are in bad shape. Push through them and this battle will be ours to win." Chapter 340, Heavy Hammer of Harun Horkle. The warriors of Iron Sand Fort fought with unbridled madness. Some who had almost used up their mana rushed upon the enemies and used their physical bodies to bring at least one with them before dying. There was even one who had lost his weapon and used his teeth to bite his enemies to death. "This is madness. These guys are insane." Harun's troops were shaken by the unrestrained assault of Iron Sand Fort soldiers. They knew no fear and looked like they had been possessed by evil ghosts. "Stand your ground. Don't be afraid. This is their final struggle, so don't be careless," shouted the commander of Harun's troops, a messy-bearded old man who wore heavy steel armor. "This won't do. I have to do something." He noticed the panic in his soldiers' eyes. He knew right away that he had to do something to stop the enemy's momentum. Otherwise, they might be caught up in the storm. "I need to kill their leader to lower their morale." He looked around, searching for Iron Sand Fort's commander. Once he killed their leader, he believed that the enemies would fall into disorder, making them easy targets for his troops. Suddenly, he caught sight of a warrior on horseback wielding a sword. His armor and helmet were covered in blood. Even his mount's armor was dyed red. Just looking at him, the old man could tell that this was the enemy's commander. "This guy has the strongest aura among them, and he also uses a sword. He must be the Western Sword Marquis Marco." Upon recognizing his target's identity, the old man's eyes flashed with profound coldness. He squeezed his legs and urged his mount to rush forward. His disaster-grade horse galloped with overwhelming speed. As soon as he gained momentum, the old man controlled his horse to take a huge leap, pouncing towards Marco, who was surrounded by tens of warriors. Whoosh! HM! Marco abruptly turned his head when he sensed a formidable aura targeting him. Horkle! Horkle, the heavy hammer of Harun. He was known for his inherently stronger physical strength. The most noticeable thing about him was his weapon, which was a two-handed warhammer that weighed over a ton. "So you recognize me?" Horkle grinned at Marco as he swung his warhammer. Whoosh! Seeing his attack, Marco didn't dare block his hammer. He turned his body and controlled his horse to evade. Boom! Horkle's warhammer crushed the ground, creating a massive crater. The force behind his attack caused the ground to tremble. Some warriors even lost their balance due to the sudden tremor. Marco skillfully controlled his mount to prevent it from toppling over. Nay! His horse made a sound of protest, clearly exhausted from all the movements. It was puffing air heavily. From the looks of it, surviving for 10 minutes was already impossible. Once his horse collapsed, Marco would have to face the besiegement of the enemies from all directions. In his current state, that was no different than death. Knowing that the situation was grim, he decisively signaled a change in formation to give himself and his troops a little bit of room to recover. "Do you think I would let you escape?" Horkle sneered upon realizing his intention. He kicked his horse's belly, urging it to move faster. He then activated the engraved ability of his warhammer. Lightning sparks gathered on his hammer, circling like little serpents. With a swing, the sparks of lightning struck forth, bringing about a devastating power that could incinerate the human body. In the face of this destructive blow, Marco could no longer afford to save his mana. He gathered what little he had recovered and unleashed a slash. Whoosh! Boom! An earth-shattering explosion erupted as soon as their weapons collided. Soil and stone debris flew in all directions, making everyone subconsciously close their eyes. After that exchange of attacks, Marco found himself at a disadvantage. Blocking that warhammer almost crushed his arms. Looking down, he could see his arms trembling. He is stronger than I am. Even at my peak, I'm afraid that I'm not his opponent. He thought to himself, this is probably where I fall. A pity. He gave up on resisting when he saw Horkle lifting his hammer in preparation for another attack. His mana was emptied out and he was already at his physical limits. Just when the warhammer was about to crush his head, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Snap out of it, Marco. How can you give up so easily? Have you forgotten the promise you made? Hearing this voice, Marco was stunned. In front of him was Derek, forcefully resisting Horkle's warhammer using a pair of swords. Oh? You called for backup? Horkle snorted and released a kick that sent Derek flying into the air. Derek! Marco called out in shock. He wanted to help Derek, but he felt a sudden chill. He instinctively dodged by rolling to the side. Boom! A large crater was formed on the spot where he stood just a few seconds ago. You have good reflexes, but for how long can you keep up? Horkel's mocking voice drifted into his ears. At this moment, Derek had already recovered from the kick. If it weren't for my armor, that kick would have damaged my internal organs. There was sharp pain on his chest, but it was within his tolerable range. He then took a quick glance at Marco, who was breathing heavily while trying to stand firmly on his feet. Marco is in bad shape. Even if we joined hands, this old fart can still overpower us both. Sweat trickled down his face as he tried to come up with a battle strategy. While he was in deep thought, he suddenly heard Marco's stern voice ringing in his ears. Derek, go and take His Highness to retreat. You guys must leave this place at once. This is a direct order from your superior. Derek widened his eyes, not expecting to hear this from him. However, he didn't listen and just grinned at him. I'm sorry, my lord. I only follow His Highness' commands.